Everybody, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us today in person and online at the New England Aquarium's Marine Conservation Action Fund Fellows Symposium. I'm Elizabeth Stevenson, the director of the Marine Conservation Action Fund, or MCAF for short. And today is the second day of our symposium. How many of you were with us yesterday? All right. Thanks for coming back again. Thrilled to have you. Yes, thank you, fellows. I'm glad you were here. Glad you all came back. That's really important. We also have some special guests today in the audience. This morning, did anybody go over to the main building of the aquarium this morning to see? And the fellows were there too. So we had this wonderful event where the fellows were stationed all around the aquarium. And my awesome colleague, Emily Dwan, spearheaded that event along with Melinda Eady, and in collaboration with the John D. O'Brien School, and many of the students are here today. So big round of applause. Thank you for coming. We're thrilled to have you with us. So thank you so much for that. I'll be starting with some housekeeping and then share some remarks about the MCAF program before turning the podium over to our fantastic lineup of speakers. So for the housekeeping, we are very excited to be using the Boost Lingo platform today to provide simultaneous translation between English and Spanish to promote greater accessibility. All the presentations today will be in English. If you would like to listen in Spanish, please scan the QR code and follow the link. Shoot, Emily, is that one slide back? There we go. So if anybody would like to listen in Spanish, it's right there. Okay. If for those of you joining us virtually, you can choose which language you would like on the bottom right of the screen. If you have any issues, please use the question mark icon on the bottom left. A tech person from Boost Lingo will assist you. I want to note and recognize their team for providing wonderful support to us through this whole process. We do ask that you please silence notifications on your cell phones. And lastly, for housekeeping, the exits are to the side here and up at the top of the stairs, where you will also find the restrooms. Now I wanted to share with you some background about the MCAF program, which brings us all together here today, and which is one of many initiatives of the New England Aquarium that extend the aquarium's work far beyond its varied and wonderful exhibits and into the Gulf of Maine and across the globe. MCAF is a small grants and fellowship program that supports the efforts of local conservation leaders in low and middle income countries around the globe. Leaders who are creating solutions that benefit ocean health, support their local communities, and advance best practices in their fields. Together, their collective impact on the ocean benefits all of us. A fundamental part of this program and its evolution has been listening to and learning from the global community of ocean leaders the program serves. The ocean leaders, whom you will hear from today, are taking a multifaceted, long view approach to their work. We need to follow their lead and do the same to better support their long-term impact. It was this thinking that led to the creation of the Fellows Program, through which we commit to providing support to conservation leaders over the course of their careers, and of which the foundation is building enduring two-way relationships with these visionary ocean leaders. MCAF has also evolved to focus on supporting local leaders in low and middle income countries which should be known as the majority world, as they make up the majority of the world's coastlines and population, and host some key marine biodiversity hotspots. And they face some of the greatest challenges from impacts of climate change, resource extraction, and other environmental threats heavily caused by high-income nations. The majority world is home to talented conservationists who have historically been underrepresented in the field due to colonialism, parachute science, deep inequities in the abilities to get visas to travel to conferences, of which we have two examples of fellows who aren't able to be with us today because they were not able to get visas. So it is a real source of inequity in the conservation field. Add to all these issues the fact that only 3% of philanthropic giving in the US goes to the environment, and only 7% of that goes to the ocean, and only 12% of all US giving goes to the types of programs that you're seeing today in terms of local leaders, grassroots organizations. So if you do the math, that is a infinitesimally small percentage. So by providing support to leaders of these local organizations, this is the gap that MCAF is working to fill. Supporting leaders who partner with local communities and stakeholders, who know the issues, the culture, the language, is the best practice for advancing the intersecting goals of ocean conservation and equity, and for achieving lasting outcomes. Now, none of this would be possible without our supporters, who include many of you here today and online, including the New England Biolabs Foundation, who has partnered with us for many years. And I want to recognize Alan and Lisa Diner, whose transformational $2 million gift to MCAF has catalyzed our $4.9 million fundraising campaign. Thank you, Alan and Lisa. And to the many generous individual donors who provide critical support to the MCAF program. I want to thank my aquarium colleagues across the institution who have all contributed to making this week a success. Particularly, I want to thank my MCAF teammates, Emily Dewan and Melinda Eady, for making this such a successful week with all your hard work and efforts. Yay! I know Melinda's not here. Melinda is out doing so. Oh no, there you are. Okay, great. The program would also not exist without the MCAF fellows, who are our best advisors, whom we are grateful to for coming from all across the globe, leaving their homes, their families, their friends, their jobs, their pets, to come spend time with us and share their work with us and with all of you. And also who are an all-around wonderful, funny, and brilliant group of leaders. The sessions yesterday and today, mark the start of a full week of events for the second MCAF Fellow Summit, the first of which was held in 2019. The goal of the summit is to promote connection, networking, learning exchange, and community building among the fellows, with the aquarium community and audiences like yourselves in Greater Boston and around the world. I know we have many listeners coming to us from across the globe on the live stream today. The goal of today's session is for fellows to share their work with one another so that this can build the foundation of their conversations in the week, spurring idea exchange and potential collaborations. We are excited to have you join us and learn about the incredible work they are each doing. Today, the fellows in each session will be presenting their work and then coming back on stage for the panel discussion, which will be moderated by MCAF fellows Anna Opoza and Asha DeVos. We won't be taking questions after each talk and ask that you hold your questions until the panel Q&A. We will also be taking questions from the chat. We'll be having a 20-minute break with refreshments between the first and second sessions in the theater lobby, where you can connect with the fellows. Today's session, this first session, we will have with us Dr. Issa Seydu and Dr. Asha DeVos, and Franklin Barbier will be joining us virtually from Haiti. So without further delay, I'm thrilled to turn the stage over to the fellows. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Issa Seydu to the podium. Thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Issa Seydu, and I'm actually with the Department of Wildlife and Range Management of the Kwame Nkrumah University for Science and Technology. I'm also with Aqualife Conservancy, a Ghana-based NGO with primary focus on marine biodiversity conservation. So at Aqualife Conservancy, I'm actually spearheading the conservation of sharks and rays among fishing communities in Ghana. And my presentation is focusing on my passion, my motivation for actually working on sharks and rays, and some of the impact I've made so far. But before I delve deeper into that, let me quickly touch on Ghana and its fisheries activities so that you have a fair idea of what our fisheries activities are. Now, Ghana is actually a maritime country in the West Africa sub-region, which is bordered to Burkina Faso in the north, Cote d'Ivoire in the west, Togo in the east, and the Gulf of Guinea in the south. The coastline of Ghana is approximately 550 kilometers, and is a host to three major fisheries activities. These are the industrial, semi-industrial, and artisanal fisheries. The artisanal fisheries alone contribute to 80% of our total annual fish stock, and it's been operated by over 150,000 people along 300 landing beaches. So men are typically into fishing, meaning they actually go to the sea, do the fishing, and bring the stock or the catch to the various landing beaches. And women are also typically into fish trading and fish processing because there's a taboo that prohibits women from going to the sea. So women are not actually allowed to go to the sea. Okay, so back to my team. So how did I get involved in shark conservation actually? And this is actually a long story, but I'll make it brief. Actually, I was born in the northern part of Ghana, and everything around us was the terrestrial species. We did not actually see the sea. So we are seeing species such as small mammals, large mammals, amphibians, dragonflies, and damselflies. So I did not have the slightest dream of working in the marine environment, let alone work on sharks and rays. So my BSc, my bachelor degree, and my master degree all focus on dragonflies and damselflies. So after my master degree, I actually went to a coastal fishing community called Disco to visit my uncle. So whilst at Disco, I saw piles or loads of sharks and rays being displayed for sale. Actually, Disco is a coastal fishing community in Ghana where majority of the fishermen have switched their gear to target sharks and rays in the wake of continued decline of the teleos. There has been a dramatic decline of teleos or bonny fish, and the fishermen, in response to this decline, are now targeting sharks and rays to support their livelihoods with a gear called drift grenade gear and complemented with a long lines. So when I went to the various landing beaches, I saw loads of sharks and rays being displayed for sale without any recourse to conservation. And I wanted to actually satisfy my curiosity about the species because this is the first time of me seeing sharks and rays. So I wanted to know the various species in Ghana and their conservation status. So I went directly to the IUCN website and I found out that there were 94 species of sharks and rays actually in Ghana. And out of these 94 species, 70% were actually threatened with extinction, meaning they were listed as vulnerable. They were listed as vulnerable, endangered, and critical endangered on the IUCN website. And two species from the swordfish were also listed as possibly extinct in Ghana. So this was actually alarming to me. And I wanted to find out more information, more papers, more publication or report on the species in Ghana. And there was absolutely no information. Nobody was actually working on the species. So my passion to work on the species kept on increasing day by day until in 2019, September, I finally decided to work on the species and collect key baseline information that can be used to devise management strategies for the species. So I developed a comprehensive proposal for my PhD to collect at least this baseline information that we can use to devise management strategies for these species. So actually, I started my active conservation work in 2019 September. But my passion to work on the species, in summary, stemmed from three major factors. One, the extinction risk of the species. Majority of the sharks and rays in Ghana are threatened with extinction. Over 70% of them are on the verge of extinction, and something dramatic needs to be done to salvage this problem. Globally, 37% of these species are threatened. Over-reliance on these species. Now, sharks are no longer a target in artisanal fisheries. They're no longer a biker, sorry, in artisanal fishing. They're rather a target because fishermen, in the wake of continued decline of the teleos, have now switched gears in artisanal fishing. They're not targeting them because as a fisherman, if you get a shark species, you get double benefit in terms of the sale of the fins and the meat. So it's actually a hot cake in the fishery industry in Ghana. And thirdly, the lack of key baseline information. Actually, when I started my work on shark and ray conservation, there was no key baseline information on the species, no data whatsoever, and nobody was interested in working on the species. And we needed this key baseline information to also devise management strategy to safeguard them from extinction. So that was my major purpose for working on sharks and rays. So I started my shark and ray conservation work in 2020 when I first won a grant from Marine Conservation Action Fund. And from 2020 till now, these are few among the many achievements or impact I've made so far. I've engaged a total of 15 artisanal fishers, artisanal fishing communities. Through our engagement, we are monitoring their landings and market sites and recording fishery data for each of the shark and ray species we have encountered. We are also raising conservation profiles in this fishing community. So we are using conservation programs such as community evangelism. This is where we go to the various churches and mosques. So this is where we go to the various churches and mosques, and then we preach to them the conservation needs of sharks and rays. We are also using programs such as after-work meetings, radio programs, as well as beach cleaning. So with the beach cleaning exercise, we take the opportunity to also raise awareness on these species, and we have donated a total of 36 waste bins to these communities. I've also provided the first record of sharks and rays in Ghana, and we've documented a total of 28 sharks and 19 ray species. And we provided comprehensive information for each of the species we have actually recorded. So through this data, we have contributed to the IUCN listing of 28 endemic and near-endemic West African sharks and rays in West Africa on the IUCN Red List. And we have also provided key information that have actually been used to the listing of 3 guitarfish species on CITES Appendix 2. So these species are Rhinobatus rhinobatus, Rhinobatus abomaculatus, and Rhinobatus averni. So I'm also organizing a series of training and mentorship program for students, fishers, local volunteers who are actually interested in shark conservation. And through my mentorship and training program, I've trained a total of 17 fishers. And out of these 17 fishers, 10 are working with me. I actually trained them in shark identification, monitoring and sampling protocol. So they are actually stationed in their various fishing communities, and they are furnishing me with data on a regular basis, 10 of them. 2 students are working with me as my team members. So I've also trained a total of 10 boat captains in spatial data collection. So they are collecting data on their fishing trajectory, their fishing pattern, their core fishing areas, as well as the spawning and nursery site of guitarfish. Because these data are critically needed. We actually aim to create a locally managed protected areas in Ghana where guitarfish and other ray species that are threatened will be protected. And that is the major reason why we are collecting actually this information. And currently, I'm working with the government authorities, governmental bodies, NGOs, as well as local fishing communities, the fishermen, the traders, the canoe owners, to devise management or conservation strategies and its implementation strategies to safeguard sharks and rays in Ghana. So thank you for your attention.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. How's everyone feeling? Sweet. There's a little bit of energy around here, a little bit lacking over there. Okay. Well, you need to give us some energy back. We're standing on stage, guys. It takes a lot of energy to do what we do. But I want to tell you a little bit of a story. So my work, historically, as a marine biologist in Sri Lanka, has given me hours on the ocean, where I've stared at the surface of the ocean, looking out for signs of life. Very often, I am looking for the largest animal that has ever roamed our planet, the mighty blue whale, and its cousins, the sperm whales, Bridie's whales, Omira's whales, and a range of other incredible species that frequent our shores. But beyond this, the ocean has also taught me, beyond giving me a career, the ocean has also taught me something about perspective. It has taught me that in its vastness, even the mighty blue whale is a mere needle in a haystack. And it's also told me that because of its vastness, if we are not building the biggest, most equitable, and diverse team of heroes, we are never going to be able to save our oceans. Through my work, I've been able to do incredible things. And you can look it all up on the internet. But just as an example, just last year, we launched the first ever deep sea exploration in Sri Lankan waters. 94% of the water around my coastline is actually deep sea because it's deeper than 200 meters. Yet no one had ever got their eyes on the bottom of the seafloor. We managed to collect footage from 300 meters all the way to 1,000 meters. And I can tell you the things we have seen are incredibly magical. I know you're all on the edge of your seats and you're waiting to find out what we saw. But today, I'm not here to tell you the results of any of my science. I'm actually here to tell you a much more important story. So why do we explore? We explore because that is the fundamental block, the building block of all the science and exploration and conservation that we do. But if you think particularly about the deep sea, it has historically been far more inaccessible than any other part of our planet. And doing research here has often been the realm of the rich. It's been accessible to people who had the infrastructure and the equipment to deep dive into these spaces and see what's down there. And people like myself, people who look like me, were never the leaders in these endeavors. But today, thanks to a range of teams that are working hard to build low-cost technology that can take us to these spaces, people like myself can do this work. And that's why it's important. It's important for the world to see people like me, local leaders, doing incredible groundbreaking research in our own backyards. Look, when I say people like me, remember, I'm a South Asian woman living and working as a marine biologist in the global South. In a country where people still often say, isn't being a marine biologist a man's job? So I am no stranger to being marginalized. Trust me. In my own country, I suffer from the gender bias. And when I travel across the world, very often, people marginalize me on the basis of where I come from and the passport that I carry. And my country suffers from the deep legacy of colonial and parachute science. The model where researchers and scientists from the global north fly into countries like mine in the global south, do research and leave without any investment in the infrastructure or the local people. Often these projects are built inequitably through inequitable partnerships, and that means that there's exploitation of local and indigenous knowledge. There's a power imbalance of those on the outside and those on the ground because the money is coming from outside. It cripples local conservation efforts, and altogether, it is unsustainable. Yes, historically, I know that colonial science, conservation, and exploration has pushed the boundaries of what we know in parts of the world like my own. But today we know much better. We know that created a bottleneck for our progress. And that sent the message that there's only a handful of people that can actually look after the world. Coming from the global south, I know that the opportunities I have and continue to have pale in comparison to my counterparts in the global north. But the challenges I face and continue to face are many times more. I have had to work significantly harder to be where I am today, and I'm not about to let it go to waste. Because I know what people in my part of the world are capable of. For too long, the voices, stories, and experiences of people from the global south and local and indigenous communities have been overlooked and even silenced in the spaces that I work. But the ocean is the largest part of our planet. And 70% of our coastlines are actually in the global south. I am what we call part of the tropical majority, the 1.59 billion people who live on coastlines in low and middle income countries who are dependent on the ocean. If you remember nothing about what I've said today, remember this. We are best placed to look after our coastlines and our backyards. We are the leaders that you need to make a difference for this planet. That is why I built Oceanswell. Oceanswell is a marine conservation research and education organization in Sri Lanka that focuses on nurturing the next generation of diverse ocean heroes and making sure everyone can engage with the magic of our world's oceans. We do a diverse range of research, and you can definitely look this up, but we work on everything from stopping whales from getting killed by ship strike. We're on the front lines of marine disasters. We work on illegal shark fisheries, cetacean bioacoustics, protecting shipwrecks as the cultural heritage of shipwrecks, and also highlighting them as biodiversity hotspots. So much work that's led by our local scientists. But beyond that, we also train early career researchers. We don't educate, we upskill, because we believe that it's important to provide them with the skills that they can use in their careers as they move forward. Through our work, we also build collaborations with incredible scientists, researchers, and educators from across the world. But these people are handpicked, because unlike the traditional model, we find the funding based on the priorities on the ground, and then we invite people to come and help us, those with complementary skills, who we know that will come in with humility and an understanding the partnership is equal. And our common goal is to have a positive impact for the oceans. Always remember that talent is equally distributed, but opportunity is not. So just because you don't see faces like mine at the global decision-making tables, it doesn't indicate that we don't have local capacity. It just points to a broken system that uplifts the privileged and sidelines our greatest allies in our effort to make the largest team to address the biggest challenges of 70% of our planet. So today, as I close, I ask you to think about this. I ask you to remember me as a marine scientist who definitely worked hard and tirelessly to protect some of the largest and most incredible creatures on our planet and the habitats that they live in. But I also ask you to remember me as the marine scientist who fought to decolonize science, conservation, storytelling, and exploration way before it was cool. To increase diversity, equity, and inclusion, to ensure that people who deserve it have their right seat at the table. Because I truly believe if we are going to save our oceans, every coastline needs a local hero. Thank you.
Hello everyone. Today I'm going to talk about my project that is protecting the critically endangered oxbill sea turtle in Lake Bass. My name is Barbier Franklin. I was born and live in Haiti in a village named Petite Rivière de Nîmes. I met Jamie Hakino, who is the founder and president of Haiti Ocean Project, a few years ago when I was in high school. She was accompanied by marine scientists. That's when I heard about the marine ecosystem and its importance. Then I decided to volunteer. This is how we start meeting fishers in their community and make new discoveries of marine species. I've been involved in sea turtle and seabird for over 10 years. And my responsibilities as seabird and sea turtle of Haiti Ocean Project. And about this picture, this is the first oxbill sea turtle that I released in my conservation story. Next slide. Oh. The main objective of the sea turtle education is, first, to allow young people to understand the cause and problem of the sea turtle bycatch, link it to the marine environment. Secondly, raise awareness among the fishermen by helping them finding other means of financial resources instead of turtle bycatch. Firstly, have a conscious future generation playing the role of defender of sea turtle. Main objective of sea turtle conservation. First, to prevent the capture of sea turtle and the sale of their scale and meat to the market. Secondly, to have the nesting beach clean and have an healthy marine habitat. Main objective of sea turtle research. First, to understand the migration route of the sea turtle, their key habitat, and their potential nesting site. That's why we put flipper and pit tag, and we will start putting satellite tag on them. We have ultrasound machine to check egg inside them. My project is focused on the conservation of the hawksbill sea turtle, but this is not the only species of turtle that we have in our area. We also have green and leatherback sea turtle. Next slide. Fellowship project in Lebas, sea turtle education. I am educating the young people of Lebas. I am teaching them about the hawksbill sea turtle, their conservation status, and their value in the marine ecosystem. I am getting them more involved in the community so they can outreach others about the value of the sea turtle because they are the future generation. I'm training the fishers to collect data to assess how many turtle caught or killed in the net, the different type of fishing method by which they caught, how to safely release them. I am teaching them also and their family about recycling ocean plastic and creating eco brick, which involve using plastic bottles to make bricks that can use for building. Next slide. Cassava production. To reduce fishing impact of sea turtle, we're helping fishers to find alternative livelihood through cassava farming. I have realized that cassava is a root that grows in Lebas, that the people did not have resources to do anything with the roots. So I am working with the local community to test the harvesting and production of cassava flour as a way to create an alternative food source and how to sell it as income. That's what I'm exploring right now. Thank you.
Okay, so earlier in the remarks of Elizabeth, she mentioned words like colonialism, parachute conservation, and equality, and you talked a lot about colonial science as well. So, how can we ensure that conservation is equitable, accessible, and inclusive to diverse set of people? And maybe you can give examples of like practices that worked or didn't work.
Yeah, that's a great question. I can answer that for hours because it's something I clearly think about all the time. I mean, I think fundamentally there's so many different levels at which we can create equity and inclusivity in science, right? Funding, funnily enough, has one of the biggest roles to play because what happens often is funding goes to large organizations outside our countries,
Yeah.
and then people come into our countries with that money, and that's where you get this power imbalance,
Yeah.
right? The outsider coming in with with an objective, with a priority that they have in mind, rather than actually coming and looking at what's the necessary, what's a priority on the ground, or even developing the research with their local partners. And that's a really important thing to make sure that it doesn't happen. So we oftentimes, our projects, we lead because we understand what the priorities on the ground. We're very happy to try to fundraise, but also at the same time, if we're bringing in our complementary team members from across the world, it's very much like understanding what their skills are and not bringing them for the sake of it. They actually have to be able to contribute, right? And they recognize that their role is they're not the face of the project, and that's a reality. Like for us, it's like, how do we uplift all these incredible young people who have absolute potential, right, to do far greater things. Like I personally think my job is opening doors and letting people run past me, right? I know there's people who are far more capable than me. So I think from the funding perspective, that's one thing. If you think about more academic perspective, right, a lot of these bad practices are driven by anyone who's an academic or has been is familiar with the publish or perish model, right, where your metric of success is how many papers you've published. And so you want to be the first author, you want to be the person in the field, you want to be the face on the project, right? And that drives a lot of bad practices. So that's another thing that's actually problematic, and trying to change that. And so I've been an editor on many journals, and where we've talked about this, practices and how to shift, creating access to knowledge, also trying to get abstracts published in local languages. I mean, like I said, I've written a lot of papers on this. So if anyone's really interested in the topic, please definitely send me a message. And I have loads of papers that I've written, my colleagues have written. Fun fact is that I've been working on this for almost a decade now. And it's nice to see it's kind of resonating amongst people, and people are talking more about indigenous communities, local communities, and empowerment, and making sure they're in the forefront. But, the publications in this area, particularly in marine conservation, have really picked up only in the last 3.5 years. And we're starting to see a increase. So that's positive, right? But we're so way behind. And I always say, like, we're wasting so much time and so much money having conversations about who should be in the room, how old they should be, what their gender should be, what their background is, all of that. To me, it's such a waste of time, because we need to be making progress. We're trying to change what's happening on the ground.
Yeah, definitely. And even the journals, it's like, how can you access these? Are so expensive. You have to buy these. It's just
Oh my goodness,
crazy.
it is crazy. And open access, I know we always think it's like the solution to everything, because it's openly accessible to everyone. But the problem there is that you're shifting the burden of the payment onto the individual who's publishing,
Exactly.
right? So, I believe very strongly in using social media as a way to translate your science so that it becomes more accessible. I feel personally responsible to make sure whatever science I do is available in a more accessible form
Yeah.
anywhere. And if anyone emails me, to be fair, I put all my papers on my website. I know it's illegal, but that's beside the point. Don't tell anyone. But anyway,
Yeah, and I think also when we talk to a lot of young people, they get their information from TikTok. So that's a source of news that conservationists should be taking advantage of, maybe.
I mean, just let's say I have a disclaimer. Like, there's a lot of good spaces, and there's lots of reliable people on TikTok who provide information. There's also
Not
a
just
lot
the
of
dancing.
misinformation. So let's yes, but also there's misinformation that we have to be
Of course,
worried
of
about.
course.
But yes, I mean, there's lots of different forms of communicating, as much as there's different forms of knowledge, right?
Yeah.
Like, we have historically lived in ivory towers and thought the only kind of knowledge that can save our oceans and our planet are people who have PhDs. But
Yeah.
that's rubbish,
Yeah.
right? We
That's
know
changed a
that.
lot.
Yeah, I mean, you work with communities, you work with young people, you know the amount of knowledge and capacity, and it's generational knowledge. That's the difference, right? If you go to these communities, they have generational knowledge that we've been overlooking because they don't have a degree from a university. Like,
Right.
what does
Yeah.
that mean, right?
Yeah. Okay, let's check in with Franklin. Franklin, are you there? He can hear us.
Yes, I am.
It says it's green.
Hold on.
Go, Franklin.
You can do it.
Okay. Another barrier of inequity. We're witnessing it firsthand. Yeah. Maybe, or well, an alternative could be he could chat, he could like type the answer, and then you can pass it on to me so I can read it.
Yeah, I
Or
can,
maybe
I
have
can,
it
I
for
can,
the
I
next
can
time.
talk.
So
I
now we
can.
can open the floor for questions from the audience and from online. And if you raise your hand, you can introduce yourself and then go ask the question, and I will repeat the question. Yes.
Hello, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Okay, I'll repeat the question. So, how can we have better scientists coordinate in terms of outcomes when they coordinate with local coordination with their governments, communities versus parachute scientists?
Yeah, so that's a great question, because the point is that people who live on the ground live and breathe the challenges that are happening around them, right? That's the fundamental thing. And we live in communities, you speak the language. So if there is a disaster, you can sit with the community and listen and understand what the concerns are and what their needs are. Now, if you fly in and fly out, first of all, working with communities, I work with blue whales, but there's a community that is supported by the whale watching industry. So there's always communities. And the thing is that when you're working with communities, trust is the fundamental thing, right? Without trust, there's no work. And trust takes forever to build. Understandably, because a lot of these communities have been exploited. People come in, take their knowledge, and leave. And then it's published somewhere else. They get no credit, no acknowledgement, nothing. And so if you're on the ground over time, you build these relationships, and sometimes they will even pick up the phone and call you and say, hey, this has happened, how do we address it, or here's something that we need help with. And that's kind of where you want to get to. And so that's why investing in local people working at the grassroots level means it actually has this ripple effect, and it's very powerful because it goes much further and it's way more sustainable because we live on those coastlines forever. I mean, I went to university in other countries, but I went home and I intend to live in my home till the day I die, right? So guaranteed, I know I can serve my country over the next many decades. I mean, who knows how long I live, but you know what I mean. So I think there's a lot more power. Long, I don't know, I don't wish that on myself, but I think there's a far more power and definitely far better outcomes, because they're tailor made to that local situation and they're connected to the realities that are happening on the ground. And there's an understanding of the needs, right there. Some examples? Yeah, absolutely. So, for example, in some of the communities that we work in, right, we work with illegal shark fisheries. And we try to, one of our research projects is looking at why there's still illegal shark fisheries happening in these communities. And so one of the approaches, because there's policies that have been put in place, and a lot of these policies have been also dictated from outside the country, right? We had a foreign researcher come in and talking about trust. She came in, she was part of this project, and she went into the field in the fish market, and the fishermen immediately said, we're not talking. Right? Because every time a foreign person comes in, that means it shuts down a part of our fishery and we lose our livelihood. And they're not willing to be honest. They're not willing to talk because they don't trust. And they said, if she doesn't come, we'll continue to work with you. And so the local researchers, once they went in, now over years, they've been able to try to understand, like, what is it what are the problems on the ground? And that helps us to actually look at policies in a very different way. How do we build policies that are actually more meaningful to the people that are at the other end of these policies? So that's just one example, but it's something that's very commonly seen across the world.
Yeah, so working with local communities, there's a lot of trust that you need to build, but also conversely, parachute science can create distrust. So if they are abandoned, then it also impacts local people when we start working with them. So other questions? Other questions? You can raise your hand. Are there questions online? Also, oh, there, we have a question there. Yes. Okay, so the question on colonial science creates short-sightedness, lack of resources, and a colonial heritage. So in your experience, have you experienced a shift in that kind of thinking?
So just to clarify, so do you mean that have I seen a shift in the way colonial science is happening or how science happens now globally? I would say yes, definitely. There's definitely more interest in now financing locally, right? Going straight to the source. Like I was at a meeting last week at Climate Week where there was this conversation about, we need to be investing more at the more grassroots level because what happens otherwise is, and there was reference to large NGOs that actually take up a lot of money, but the impact on the ground is much less than if you actually go straight to the grassroots level organizations that are already anyway working in those spaces, that already have those collaborations and partnerships that can actually then have impact. So we are seeing kind of a slight shift away from that and a realization, rather slow one, that that colonial model has done more damage than good. And I think it is refreshing to see. We're very slow. We have a long way to go, but I do think that there's hope there.
Yeah, and to add to that, it's like, in conservation, we have a term called bingo. It's the big international NGOs that you're probably familiar with. And when funding goes to grassroots organizations like ours, there's like additional pressure to do well because then you have to prove that we're worth investing in, even if we're small and we're local and we're building things from scratch. Okay, any more questions? Yes, we have a question here. There. Oh. Oh yeah. So what is NGO? That's a good question. We're so used to using this. So it's non-governmental organization or like a non-profit organization. Any more questions? We have one more. Yes. So the question is on the transition for conservation technology and where you are in that spectrum.
Yeah, so Jenny's been working on this incredible project in the past where they're developing, I mentioned low cost tools for deep sea exploration. And it was a really interesting model because that team actually collaborated with a bunch of us researchers across the world from the global south or low and middle income countries to actually ask us what our needs were, what the barriers were to us actually doing the deep sea exploration work that we were doing. And there was this extensive report that was put together that actually was put together before they even started developing the technology, right? Because at the end of the day, it's a tool that's being built for people to use across the world. And you can't just build something and then drop it in people's lap and expect it to work, right? So really understanding the needs. And that was a really important step. And we're still working as collaborators. We published a paper together about what the process was. And now we're like, there's a bunch of us that are pilot testing the instrument. We're basically moving forward on trying to also look at other technologies that are necessary, and there's other groups that are now looking at like what tools do we build. But again, I think that model of going back to who the users are, and you can't, I mean, this is a big problem actually, even if you think about data, right? Quite often a lot of teams will come to your country, they'll do research, and then they don't want to be parachutey, so they'll dump all the data and they leave, and they're like, but we gave you the data, but they haven't given you the tools to actually analyze the data, right? So that data just sits there and rots. So part of this was also, it's a very simple tool, and there's all these instructions on how to fix it and things, just very basic things. There's always someone on call that we can send the instrument back to. There's someone always on call to respond to your maintenance needs. See, these are components that we never think about otherwise, right? It's a tool, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and that's on you normally. But I think being thoughtful about how you work across the world, and there is room for everyone. Like I said, we have collaborators from across the world. world. We're not saying you can't work across the world. We're saying be thoughtful about how you work across the world. How are you approaching people? Are you coming with humility, or are you telling us what we need to do in our own backyard, right? And I can tell you, like, you would not appreciate it if someone came into your house and told you how to run your own home, right? Because that's your space, that you are familiar with it. You've grown up, you know where everything belongs. And just think about it in that context. And I think that's something that we need to think about a lot more, is like, how do we want to be treated in our own homes? And that's how we should kind of reach out and treat other people in theirs.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Yay, we have a comment.
Yes, so we have something in the chat from Franklin answering the questions about DEI in the conservation field. So his answer is that we can ensure the conservation field is equitable, accessible, and inclusive to a diversity of people by making sure that everyone has the same opportunities, regardless of their financial situation, their disability, their gender, or the situation going on in their country. In Haiti, for example, it is difficult to get a travel visa to another country, especially the United States, which is the reason that he is not here at the Fellows Summit today. So thank you for the answer, Franklin.
And I just want to add to that. I know you want me to get off stage, but I just want to add to that. Just to say that, look, remember, at least, okay, this team has tried their best to make sure Franklin was able to be here, right, in some form. But remember, when his voice is not in the room, people just assume in Haiti there's no work being done. That is the problem, right? And these visas prevent people from coming to these spaces. I'll tell you, I have a student who's got rejected for her Portuguese visa twice, right? Twice. And now she can't apply. She doesn't want to apply anymore because she doesn't know if it'll jeopardize her other chances for getting visas in the future. But that means her work, she's not able to go across the world and talk about her research to colleagues, to share what she's been doing. What does that mean when these voices are lost from the room? What does it mean when we're actively stopping people from being at the decision-making table, right? And I know today I could have talked about my research, and I can tell you I do incredible stuff with blue whales and sperm whales and orcas and you name it. I have amazing experiences. I can talk about all of that. But if I have a stage, for me, the priority is really to speak for the people who are not in the room. And there's a lot of people who are not in the room, who don't have the privilege I have to be standing here today. And so I'm here to share their story. People like Franklin, people like my student, who may never be in this room.
Thank you so much. When I was listening to your talks, the three of you, I was thinking about how we are here, and all of us are here because people open doors for us. And people like you, Isa, Franklin, you make sure that you leave the door open for others to be able to walk in. And there's this cliche about life being like like it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. But your work, Isa's work, Franklin's work, it shows me that this is a relay. You work and then you pass on the work so that they can move to the finish line, and we cheer for each other along the way. So thank you for the work that you do. Thank you, Franklin, Isa, and Asha. And now we're going to go on a break.
Hey, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me right now. My name is Shaw Selby. I am a conservation technologist. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the work that we do. This is my lab. You can see it's actually behind me right now. It's in downtown LA. I wish that I could be there with everyone right now, but we've been going through some family stuff, so I wasn't able to leave. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we do here. I'm a slightly different sort of person than maybe you've been listening to in the last couple of days. I'm actually an engineer. And I started an organization called Conservify, and we're really focused around how can we be tool makers to help to support all the incredible scientists and ecologists and that you hear about all the work that they're doing, right? So we're really just focused on how do we make better tools to support their work, support their research, and help them do things across the world. And so we work in marine spaces, we work in terrestrial spaces, we have projects all over the world on glaciers and in rainforests and all that sort of stuff. One of the main things about everything that we do is 100% of it is open source. So if you've never heard about open source before, it's a philosophy around technology development where, if you create something, you don't kind of hold all that knowledge and information in and try and go get a patent, right? You design a technology, you write some software code, and then you put that out there online for anyone to be able to take and adapt and modify and make their own. And it's sort of a way to push technology forward without like kind of the formal structures around proprietary technology and patents and all that sort of stuff. All the projects that we do support scientists in the field doing real world work. And, you know, we try and make better tools to support that sort of stuff, because traditionally those tools are either hard to get or they're expensive, and there's lots of issues around that. So I work in the world of conservation technology. I've worked in this kind of space before it was even called conservation technology. And so, you know, originally we're just kind of opportunistically taking things that other people were doing, you know, drones from the military or, you know, sensors from industrial applications, and putting them in kind of environmental spaces. But now we design it from the ground up. And that's sort of what my work is focused around, is like, how do we take everything we've learned about kind of smartphones and like how this technology comes together and build scientific tools with them. So our main project at FieldKit, which is now its own independent nonprofit, or at Conservify, which is now its own independent nonprofit, is FieldKit. And that's focused really around environmental sensors. So how do we measure and understand the changes to the environment and do so in a way that's open source and accessible and easy to use for anybody who wants to use it? And so we're designing these tools using new methods and really trying to kind of go against what is seen as like the traditional scientific best practices and tools that are out there. So I'll explain a little bit more about what that means. But FieldKit itself is a couple different things. We build hardware. So here's one that I'll be talking about in a second. This is an ocean sensor. And then we created a way for people to talk to the hardware using an app, because, you know, all of us use apps for things every single day, and it's kind of the easiest way we know how to interface with things. And then a data visualization website that takes all that information and puts it online for people to explore and look at. So one of the things we do is we design a lot of hardware. So we're trying to build all these new different sort of devices that people can use, and we create it in a way that's super modular. So this is something that's very hard to do right now, outside of like a FieldKit sort of solution, is that you can plug and play whatever kind of sensor that you want on a single sort of device. And, you know, traditionally this sort of configuration would cost tens of thousands of dollars, and we can build something that does it for, you know, $300, $400, something like that. I just showed the underwater FieldKit that we've been building. This is something that's actively being deployed in Panama at the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute. That's the first prototypes of them that are going out, but we're building a bunch of them, and we're going to send them to scientists so that they can use them to kind of explore and understand water chemistry in different places, depending on where they want to do their work. Part of that work is we design these water circuits. So to understand things like pH and conductivity, you know, these circuits are typically pretty expensive, but we designed our own versions of them. It's gone through years of testing, and then these circuits are now open source, so anyone else can use them to build their own tools if they want to. And the app itself is meant to be like really user friendly. So, you know, when I heard some of the discussions earlier about like designing technology, during the question and answer section, and how you can design a technology with the people in mind who are actually going to be using it. And so that's something we've been doing a lot of. We always talk to the folks, we're hand in hand with the people who are actually going to be using these tools, and make sure that the software and kind of the interface that the people touch is actually going to be useful for the things that they need. And then we also do, you know, a data visualization portal that allows you to kind of explore and look at that sort of data. As I said, everything's completely open source. So everything we learn about calibration and how to build these things and what the circuit looks like and what the code looks like, we put that all online so anybody can learn from it. They can take it and modify it and create their own if they'd like to do that sort of thing. And then we're going beyond that and creating sort of a Wikipedia around all this information around environmental sensors, so other people are able to kind of take these tools and get rid of some of the kind of black magic that's around the current configurations. With FieldKit, we manufacture hardware, but we also want to be very friendly with like putting this stuff out in the world. So we take back all the hardware that nobody wants anymore, and we take the pieces off. We recycle. We think a lot about how the full life cycle of these sort of systems look like. And then we try and work with a lot of like educators and other folks who want to take that information and create their own versions of these sorts of things. So very quickly, I'll talk about a couple projects that we're working on with FieldKit. The city of New York is actually using FieldKit for flood monitoring throughout all the boroughs in the city of New York. And so anytime there's floods there, like the community can kind of come and see the information around the flood, comment on it, share it through other folks, and really like form a kind of communication around this data online. We do a lot of work with universities. So like one of the universities we work quite a bit with is UCLA, and in the Congo Basin, which is like the specific rainforest we're working in is the Jaw Faunal Reserve in Cameroon. Developing tools that are open and allow researchers, Cameroonian researchers, to be able to go into these places and collect data in a way that just was not possible before because of the cost of these systems. And we deployed sensors on glaciers before. This is a project that we worked on with Parks Canada and Banff National Park to monitor how glaciers, melt in three-dimensional space, and then all this data gets shared live. This project's interesting in that like all the data actually gets shared through a public art installation in Calgary. So there's actually a park in Calgary you can walk to, and you could see like the geophone information and the accelerometer information is translated to lights and sounds throughout the park, so you understand how active that glacier is actually being. But it's an interesting example of how you can take scientific data and make it accessible to people who aren't scientists. So that's my whole spiel on the stuff that I work on, and I'm looking forward to hearing from the rest of you guys. Thanks. Bye.
I think it's good there. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for being here. My name is Florencia Vilches. I am a researcher at the Instituto de Conservación de Ballenas, or ICB for short, an Argentine organization that works for whale conservation through research, education, and advocacy. Oops. Don't look. There. Our work is focused on southern right whales with a particular interest in the population that uses the waters off Peninsula Valdez in Patagonia as a calving ground. And the research that we conduct is aimed at describing not only the basic biology of these whales, which serves as a baseline for subsequently identifying changes in the population, but also aimed at understanding the conservation issues that these whales currently face and could potentially face in the future. At the very backbone of our research is represented by a photographic catalog and a database with the life histories of more than 4,000 southern right whales that have been individually identified based on their callosity patterns. The catalog was started in 1971 by Roger Payne and has been curated for the last 5 decades now by Professor Vicky Roundtree. Very similarly to the amazing photo ID work that has been conducted here at the New England Aquarium for decades as well, based on the population here of North Atlantic gray whales. Around the time that this catalog was half as old as it is right now, I was starting elementary school, and while all my classmates drew houses and parents and siblings and pets, all I drew was this, very proudly signed at the very bottom. So it was already pretty clear to my parents that they had lost me to this idealism of making a living out of protecting the ocean. Because, when it's job stability and financial security, the whales to me are the souls of the ocean. And so I went to college to get whatever degree would put me closer to them. So I was halfway through my undergrad studies, which again, I picked because of the whales without ever having seen one of them. My parents still hanging in there. I was halfway through my undergrad studies when I joined ICB. Flash forward to 7 years of being part of ICB, Vicky Roundtree, the curator of our catalog, an only pair of eyes that has analyzed the thousands of whale photos that we take each year, proposed me to train me into Bright Whale Photo ID with the main objective of building a local team of photo ID researchers. And so 7 years after that, everything started with Vicky as a single person working on the backbone of our research. And that developed during these last 7 years into an amazing team of 6 local researchers and volunteers that are currently led by both of us. I purposely put MCAF's logo at the very center of this amazing team because its support was fundamental in the very early stages of this big jump. It allowed me to spend a whole fun summer with Vicky in Utah, being trained by her in 2016. And it's also largely thanks to MCAF's sustained support through the years that we are able to maintain this amazing but also much needed team of photo ID local researchers. This local empowerment allowed us to start a citizen science project with the whale watching community in Puerto Piramides, Patagonia. They basically wanted us to leverage their presence at sea throughout the whale season, which goes from June through December, and contribute their whale photos to our catalog, which till then has been built exclusively through photos taken from the air annually. And so we said yes. And then this happened. The next thing we knew, we had roughly 500,000 whale photographs in our hands. We recognized that this archive represented an invaluable information source, but also many challenges, including how to handle the community's expectations, and also the huge bottleneck created by our very limited human resources, the insufficient funding that we have to access new technologies such as AI that could significantly speed up the photo analysis process. Nonetheless, we made it to processing the photos taken during the first 6 years, which represents less than 1% of all the photos we have, but that's okay. And we were able to find very interesting data. We incorporated 2,031 new whales to the catalog, and we recited 113 whales that were already known individuals in the catalog. Some of them hadn't been seen for 22 years. And a very relevant fact is that out of those known whales that have been recited, almost 60% haven't been seen during the aerial survey of the corresponding year. So this photographic source is invaluable because it provides a type of data that our aerial survey cannot provide. Because the whale watching photos are taken much closer to the whales compared to the aerial photos, we have more chances of identifying the whales in their year of birth when they still have teeny tiny colossal patterns. And this way, we can increase the number of cataloged whales with known ages and known moms. Right whales give birth every 3 years, and having intervals that are extended compared to that are indicative of reproductive failures. And so by increasing the sighting records of known whales, we will extend the information in these intervals and therefore better understand the population's reproductive success. Because the whale watching photos are taken throughout the whale season, we can identify them over a broader period of time and therefore describe their residency times in the area according to their sex and their age class, which hasn't been described since the early 80s. And finally, given the proximity from which the whale watching photos are taken, we will be able to better monitor the presence and frequency of anthropogenic wounds and scars. So, why does all this work matter? Long-term studies such as the Patagonian Southern Right Whale Catalog produce knowledge needed to describe the basic biological parameters of any animal system. Once those baseline values are known, they serve as a reference for monitoring them through the years, thus allowing the detection of changes in population's health and the estimation of the impact that potential threats might have on the whales. I, by far, love this picture. It shows one of our annual meetings that we have with the community. In particular, this one was the first meeting that we had right after starting the citizen science project. I'm there asking them to join me in matching a whale that one of them photographed. And these are their faces after realizing that we had that whale in our catalog and that we were able to add a new sighting record to our life history, literally thanks to their contribution. So this also matters because scientific knowledge belongs to societies. Every photographic record contributed by this community goes back to them in the form of scientific knowledge that they incorporate and share during their recite histories or sighting histories, during whale watching tours, hierarchizing and enriching the value that they have as people who spend the most time in contact with whales, and also enriching the thousands of tourists who enjoy the experience on board. Thank you.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Rafi. So I'm from Indonesia. I'm currently a PhD student at the Nicholas School of the Environment at Duke University. This is my first year, but I'm also a co-founder of Treasure Shark Indonesia, which is a local organization that was actually inspired by Anna. Where's Anna? There. to study about treasure sharks since 2017. So a little bit of my personal intro. So my journey to marine conservation and marine biology was a little bit untraditional because in middle income Indonesian community, you are considered successful if you are become a doctor or become an engineer or become a civil servant. But I applied to medical school 5 times and I got rejected. And then my mom was like, okay, whatever, like which program in university I want to accept you. And then marine science program, they have 70 people quota, but they only have 12 applicants. So it's kind of like an automatic acceptance. But throughout my journey in marine science program, I'm still really interested with the aspects of medical science. And then my undergrad research was actually on discovering the potential of bioactive compounds from a sponge as the anti-malaria. But then throughout my undergrad thesis, I realized that I cannot sit down in the lab with only a pipette and only one person to talk for 6 months. And I just decided that's kind of like an eye-opening, like, I don't think I can do this anymore. And then in 2016, after I graduated from my undergrad, I joined a Lamakera project that is located in Lamakera, which is a little island on the south within the Coral Triangle region, which is one of the most biodiverse region on Earth in marine biodiversity. And the sad reality there is that we have a community there in Lamakera that have been hunted manta rays traditionally for hundreds of years. And they've been not only hunting manta rays, but also whales, orcas, dolphins, any types of marine megafauna that are present and also being residents in the area. And I think that from this experience, I realized that there has been a disconnect between marine science that I've been studying during my undergrad, the policies, and also with the marine conservation in general, especially with the communities there. Because in 2014, manta rays was actually protected through a top-down regulations from the Indonesian government, and it has been created a lot of conflicts and a lot of political challenges with the communities there because they still insisted to catch manta rays. And I decided myself, so okay, I think this is something that I really want to dedicate my life to understand what is the community need, what needs to be done in order for us to protect the endangered marine animals, but also protecting the livelihoods of the people there. So after my internship for 3 months, they hired me, the same organizations, to work still in manta rays conservation, but this one is in Raja Ampat, which is located in West Papua. One of the most beautiful places I've visited. And manta rays are there, thankfully protected. So it's been one of the main attractions for people in West Papua to go dive. People from around the globe go dive there and see manta rays. And my job was actually taking photos. And when I showed this to my mom, I was like, so your job is just taking photos of fishes. And yeah, she's not still approve of it. But anyway, I'm happy. And but the issue there still, I think we always have continuous issues about conservation is that yes, they are protected. Yes, manta rays become prima donna for diving, but then over tourism happen. Like thousands of people dive in the same site for one day, and it's kind of like disrupted the presence of the manta rays there, the habitat are distracted. And it's just like my role is to kind of like introducing a good practices on tourism to make sure that the habitats can be prolonged in the near future. After working for about 2 years, I decided to embark on my own journey. So in 2018, I co-founded with my friends Treasure Shack Indonesia. The goal is the same: is to solve the livelihood conflicts of the people, especially in a lower island, Nusa Tenggara. It's a beautiful region, but people there have been dependent on pelagic treasure sharks for many years. So this is our team now. All of us, young people, sorry, below 30 years old. And we've been working on Treasure Shack Indonesia since 2018. So it's almost 5 years. 50% of our staff are originally from the island, so they're indigenous. They're wonderful. They're one of the most motivated young people that I've been working with. So the reason, this is the question that I got asked a lot, like, why treasure sharks, why manta rays, or why these species. So the fact that pelagic treasure shark is one of the endangered species by the IUCN, or the International Union for Conservation of Nature. So their populations has been heavily fished by our fisheries, both in small scale and also in industrial fisheries. And the reason why their population is declining, because they contribute 50% of catches in industrial tuna. So if you can imagine, one fleet of tuna can land for about 1,000 tons of fish. 50% of them are treasure sharks. So it's a lot of bycatch issues there in the industrial fisheries that has created a decline in 80% of the populations. So this survey has been done in 2016 because many of these individuals have been disappearing from many of the fishing grounds that they face, that fish for over years. And yet, nobody really do something about it. And NGOs, government organizations have been doing research on sharks, but not specifically on the pelagic treasure sharks. And then that's the reason why we think it is very important, at least to understand firsthand what is the cause of the declines further, and then what we can do to prevent them in further decline. And then we decided to start the work in Alor Island, which is located in the eastern Indonesia. So this is always a fun trivial questions when I ask people, like, do you know how many islands Indonesia has? Anyone? 10,000, almost 17,504 islands. So yeah, it's large areas, and then shark fisheries are everywhere. But we sort of like have a challenge, like, so where do we start? Like, where can we make the most impacts? And then East Nusa Tenggara region represent almost 30% of the total marine protected area. So we have around 28 million of marine protected area in the country. And in Alor, there are only 20 shark fishermen, very small community, but nevertheless, they're actually catching 300 sharks per year. And with majority of them, 80% of them are pregnant females. So 300, only the sharks, not counting the baby. So when we dissected the belly of the sharks, they could actually found 2 baby sharks inside. So it could be like 500, 600 sharks that are landed. And we asked ourselves the questions. So would stopping the fishery then immediately protect the local populations? Because we believe that maybe in Alor, it could be like a popping ground, an important areas where the females actually go there and then to release pup, but unfortunately they got fished by the fishermen themselves. But then, because we realized that the people there have been hunting them for 50 years, we know that it is not easy to find the solutions on how to make sure that the sharks are protected, but also we can protect the social well-being and the economic opportunity for the community there. So we do 3 kind of approach. So the first one, of course, the science is important. We do the movement studies on treasure sharks using the satellites and also acoustic tagging within the MPA. And then importantly, we work with the local communities and stakeholders to explore the economic alternative, what we can do to reduce their economic dependence on this species. And then lastly, nurture the indigenous young leaders to lead marine conservation initiative. Because myself, I'm from Jakarta, I'm from outside, and we think that long-term marine conservation efforts needs to be sustained by the local communities themselves, especially the indigenous people. So this is Salul. So he's the shark fisherman that we have been working with. And he's been helping us on the research, and then he's also helping with the release of the sharks after we tag them. And this kind of like changing his attitude towards the species as well, because previously he's never been swimming with them. He just tag them and then eat the meat. But right now he has a little bit more understanding about why we should protect them. And based on the study, interestingly, we found kind of like a critical habitats for the sharks. So this is the island, Pura Island, where we mostly conduct research. And there's like 2 reefs around here that the sharks actually utilize between day and night. And then they stay there for 6 months, and then indicating that they're actually quite residents, especially the female individuals that's been there for about 6 months, and then potentially pupping. We don't know. But unfortunately as well, that area is actually the main fishing ground for the fishermen. And then meaning that if the fishing continues, it will continue wipe out the remaining populations that we have, especially the pregnant females. So we've communicated this information to local government. We say that, look, treasure sharks here are important. They are pregnant, and it could be one of the important assets for the local government there. And then they approved. And then on 2022, after our work for 4 years, the government decided, okay, we're gonna fully protect the sharks within the Eastern Tenggara Marine Protected Area. That's the ongoing work that we do now. Of course, the regulations is achieved, but implementation and enforcement is a whole new story. And then we've also transitioned from the 20 shark fishermen. We work with 9 of them who have been agreed to transitions into alternative livelihoods. So 9 of them, we've been working with them for years and then providing them facilities. When we talk with them, like, what do you want to do to shift the shark fisheries? They said, oh, we want to fish for tuna, because tuna is more expensive, but we don't have the boat, we don't have the money, we don't have any facilities and skills and knowledge to do that. So we provide them with the incentive, we provide them with the new boats, the machine, and also the money for them to be able to sustain their new livelihood as a tuna fishers. So these 9 fishermen have been 100% stopping shark fishing, and then the shark mortality has been reduced from at least 200 to around 75 sharks as now last fish from the area. So it's a small success that we've achieved, and hopefully we can engage more fishers to join us in the initiative. And from that new livelihood as well, we see that the shark fishermen can actually earn more money from fishing for tuna and other livelihoods, and they can have they can have 400% more income from the new fisheries, especially from the tuna fisheries. And we think that could be like an attractive new opportunities for the fishermen, and we continue to advocate to invite more people to join us. Not only the fishermen, but also the wives, because the entire supply chain of fisheries, the fishermen fish the sharks and the wives sell the sharks. And we realize that the wives also play an important role in the economy, and then we invite the fisher wives to develop the alternative products. So this is one of the wife of the fisher, Mama Saleha, who is now able to sell her products in modern retailer. He previously we only sold them locally, but now she was able to sell the products into the supermarkets, and hopefully we can collaborate more with other retailers and modern supermarkets. We've also worked with the local indigenous people there, especially the young people, and we've trained 36 young indigenous champions over 2 years of program. They're not only working for sharks, some of them are shark fishermen kids, and they work on a wide range of issues from reducing marine waste, recover mangrove areas for climate resilience, and also stopping coastal sand mining, because people still mining sand, mining corals to build houses. And we actually invite the young people there to be the advocates in their own villages for the marine ecosystem. We've also developed this is the marine curriculum. We make it, we institutionalize the marine conservation curriculum, because people been living in the coastal areas, but they were not able to go down there and see what's down there, because they don't have the Googles, they don't have the mask to dive safely. And then we ensure that students there at least in the 10 coastal school for start, and then use this curriculum and embed them into the local regulations. So it could be taught at least every week, and students can experience the marine ecosystems in their backyard. And with the support of MCAF, we were able now to extend the bit of our work. So it's 5 years. It's very long. It's tiring, but I think we see more and more opportunities with our approach. And right now we are expanding to Banda Archipelago, which is still in eastern Indonesia. It's a beautiful region, and we just found out that treasure sharks there have been caught as a bycatch. So this is the photo that we collected from our last survey, where the treasure sharks there just accidentally caught. Nobody wants to eat them, so they're just being thrown away in the ocean. So this is quite a sad reality, and hopefully we can continue to make change for the conservation. Thank you very much.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon.
They have energy. I'm going to ask the same question that Asha asked earlier. Hey, how are you? Woo! Yeah, so that has been an amazing round of talks. I just want to give my thanks again to Elizabeth and the MCAF team and all you MCAF fellows, because it's always so inspiring to hear you all. And this is actually the last talk of the symposium. So, oh my goodness, no pressure. But anyways, my name is Kirsten Forsberg. I am a marine conservationist and social entrepreneur from Peru. And today I am going to talk about my story in marine conservation. And it all starts here. And for those of you who were yesterday, you must have heard some of our fellows as well that work with sea turtles. And so I was actually very young. I was 22 years old and straight out of undergrad school and started this tiny project to try and understand sea turtle mortality and bycatch. And this led to having more than 100 volunteers in less than a month that were patrolling beaches, that were reporting sea turtle strandings, fishermen that reporting incidentally caught sea turtles, reporting nesting, amongst others. And that was the basis of Planeta Oceano. And Planeta Oceano has three main action pillars. Just as you may have heard from other fellows as well, we work on research and citizen science and engaging that in policy. We work on education and sustainable development. And I would say that our work is very participatory and multidisciplinary. But I also don't want to talk too much about what specifically we are doing, but more in terms of what I have kind of learned throughout the years. It's something that I have felt, especially and even more so over the last few weeks and months, which is the fact that long-term conservation is necessary if we want to create impact. And long-term conservation has ever-evolving cycles. So these are continuous cycles that we need to nurture and embrace if we want to ensure success. So hopefully today, we have been working with a range of projects from like the oil spill that we had recently in Ventanilla in Peru. We've been working with sharks in marine protected areas. But today I want to give you 3 key stories that show how these ever-evolving cycles have taught me so much in my own conservation work. So this first story is on sawfish. For those of you that don't know this magnificent creature, it is the most threatened marine fish in the world. It is ray. It is a large-toothed sawfish. It was thought to be extinct in Peru. Oh my goodness! Yeah, somebody said, "Don't look back." Okay, there you go. It moved by itself. Okay, so it was thought to be extinct in Peru, and we set out to try to find it. That photo that you see there, it was caught from citizen scientists, from a local fisher, and we worked in close collaboration with our fellow MCAF fellow, Ruth Lee, Dr. Ruth Lee. So with Ruth, we started developing questionnaires and trying to understand where these last sawfish were, going out to the field and talking with local people. This obviously engaged. We engaged over 100 youth across Peru and Ecuador. This research, we're actually very excited because it just got accepted in ESR, Endangered Species Research, in a journal. So it's going to be published very soon, and you'll be able to read it as well. This is actually was mentioning what we want always with our science is to try to showcase this to people. So we developed this crazy infographic to show what this, how this population still exists and how it is very much threatened by gillnet fisheries. So our work with fishers, our work with students that were patrolling basically the whole coast of Peru and Ecuador, half of the coast of Peru, led to also enactment of legal protection for sawfish in the country. So we were able to put that forward and get that done. But here's where the cycle continues. So we can't stop there, right? So we got legal, sawfish legally protected in the country, but thinking about scaling up, for us, it comes in 2 ways. Scaling up in terms of deepening where you're working. So we have to continue working locally to build sawfish protection and restoration, but also scaling up geographically. And so our next cycle took us to Next People. And this has actually occurred just the day before I traveled here. I will never organize a huge event, international event, before I'm traveling to a big summit. So we are actually now in the process of developing a regional strategy for softfish in the Eastern Tropical Pacific. This is a regional strategy that goes from Mexico all the way down to Peru. It will be a huge process, which we hope finalizes by next year. But we started, and you can see those amazing people that we started working with, specialists from across the region, experts, people from governments, all kind of like with their crazy faces of sawfish that we're trying to pretend. But this just shows that it's never ending, really. You finish one step, and that's the beginning of the next. And so now, hopefully, maybe I can come back in a few years' time and tell you how our regional sawfish strategy is going and how we're implementing it. So I'm going to show you, this is another story. This is on giant manta rays. Giant manta rays are an endangered species. Sawfish were critically endangered. And we started working with giant manta rays several years ago. I remember being at this precise stage, thanks to Elizabeth, and talking about the threats that giant manta rays were facing, talking about how they were being captured intentionally in fisheries, about how we were patrolling the beaches with youth to understand this fishery issue. And that kind of evolved into this multidisciplinary program in which we've been collecting plankton to understand feeding, where we've been tagging giant mantas to understand their behaviors, taking that information to schools, taking samples for genetics, collaborating with local scientists, and also very much so with the local community. So prior to the pandemic, we started building a Fisher Ecotourism Association to value manta rays alive rather than harvested. We have an interpretation center, artists that were engaged, community artists that were engaged, of course, talking about cycles, embrace and nurture cycles, because not every cycle is positive, right? So definitely there was a huge impact in terms of the impact that we had for ecotourism, but we come back. Right? So we came back, and that's where our cycle continues now. And we're now trying to reactivate this within the community. So for us, this was actually the very first photo of a giant manta that a fisher showed us. This was at the time where they were still harvesting giant manta rays. However, after our work in collaboration with MCAF and with several local and international partners, we were able to also, for giant manta rays, gain national and legal protection for giant manta rays. However, that does not mean that giant manta rays are not killed within fisheries. And bycatch is huge. And bycatch is still a huge problem. That research there that we published, you can see how we found a fetus within a giant manta. And it is very common for fishers to find mantas that have a pup, and these species reproduce really slowly. So, as I said, you finish one step, you work on giant manta prairie protection, you get that done. What's your next step? Your next step is, let's try to figure out how we can reduce manta bycatch. Mantas are still getting killed, right? So if you see that photo up there, you have Elizabeth in our workshop. We started hosting, we hosted a binational workshop with multiple specialists to try to start thinking of how can we reduce manta bycatch. And this led to different ideas in terms of how can we avoid the interactions happening in the first place? How can we promote fishers from releasing the mantas that are caught in the nets? How can we start researching more? So we researched with Stanford to try to understand what was happening with the mantas, and understanding that they were at the surface a long time, and that increased potential for them to get interactions. And then this is the very latest update within our cycles and ever-evolving work. So now we are collaborating with Earth Ranger, who's an app where basically fishers are trained and given the infrastructure to monitor giant manta rays while they are fishing. If they report a manta ray sighting, if they report bycatch, and all of that information leads to management, leads back to communities, and ultimately what we want is to develop a source of information that in which they know where the mantas are, in which they can avoid bycatch. And this is another cool thing that we are working on in terms of bycatch. And this was done in collaboration with Ryan here from the aquarium, Ryan Notick. So thank you very much, Ryan. So basically, it's about thinking where the mantas are and developing hotspots. So if we know kind of where they are, and this is kind of like historic data that we're putting together and analyzing hotspots in like grids. Sorry that I don't have a lot of time to go through that, but we can talk about the science in the break. So basically what we have here is if we, and for those of you that went to our activities and at the aquarium, we can understand where the mantas are. We can, and the kids did that too, where the mantas are, what the effort is, and where the potential hotspots are that we need to protect. So it's really, as you see, kind of like this ever-evolving cycle where we started, first of all, understanding that there were mantas, that there was a threat, that we needed legal protection. Now we're on the bycatch level. And so it's always kind of like this step-by-step process. It's this long-term commitment. Another thing that we are working with in terms of the bycatch is going out and interviewing fishers. And so fishers were asked the same question, not just in terms of like the sightings, but where do you have interactions? So we've been running this map, and this is still at a very preliminary stage, to understand what the fishers say in terms of where they are interacting with mantas. And that kind of coincides with what we're finding with the sightings data too. So we're gonna try to put them two together. The interesting thing here at this photo is you can see, well, that's during the pandemic, the masked up people. Edgardo there in the photo with his manta ray t-shirt used to harvest giant manta rays. And so now he's one of our key manta ambassadors in manta conservation, and he brings people on. So that cycle continues, not just in projects, but in people. So in that photo, you can see Edgardo's daughter and Edgardo's niece, and they both took part in the fisher surveys, and he's part of this app program as well. So it really is about ever-evolving cycles within these relationships. So my third story leads to this. Just straight after my work with sea turtles, I recognized, like many of us fellows here, the need to engage more ocean issues within classrooms, and they weren't, schools weren't talking about the ocean. So we set out to form a network. It's called the Marine Educators Network of Northern Peru. It's engaged more than 50 schools across the years. This started in 2009. The sea turtle work started in 2007. And since then, it's evolved to have dozens of youth-led projects of teachers that are engaged. We're connecting schools across borders. You can see that photo up there. And where is Andres and Elena? I'm not sure if they're around here. There's Andres. So we're connecting between the MCAF fellows. So those, you can see Misión Tiburón there. So their students in Costa Rica with our students in Peru, and trying to showcase that we have this one shared ocean. A teacher also going out to see a giant manta. So just as kind of like a story, because I want to really update you on where we are at the moment. This is what we started with. And when we started, again, as many of the stories that you've heard throughout these days, this started from scratch, right? So this started from scratch, from people just listening and teachers coming to try to understand what the ocean was and what it meant, right? And so I'm really excited also to share these photos with you, just taken very briefly, not very long ago, just a few weeks ago. So I had the opportunity to travel to Tumbes, which is one of our main field sites. It's the northern border between Peru and Ecuador. And we hosted this teacher summit. This was exactly 14 years after we hosted our first teacher summit and built the Marine Educators of Northern Peru. When I first got there 14 years ago, it was us kind of trying to come in and listen what the teachers needed, what we could build together. This time it was more facilitating. This way it was time to have the teachers on the stage, and it was the teachers themselves teaching their peers and teaching based on their experiences. So that ever-evolving cycle in which you're kind of like inspiring this hope within the community, but that the community takes it on themselves and evolves the conservation project themselves. In this large photo over there was a very important day for me. It was a day in which I met with some of the alumni of our program. So when I met these kids were probably in their very early 8, 9, 10-year-olds. Now they have gone on to, some of them become early professionals. Some of them are in undergrad school, and they would come up to us and they would say, your program changed my life. Your program really gave me the tools to do what I want to do now. Like, these are kids that are studying fisheries. These are kids that are doing engineering and incorporating environmental issues within what they're doing. They're studying forestry. They're bringing their kids along, right? Some of the sea turtle volunteers that we started with in 2007 are teachers now and bring back their kids to the Marine Educators Network. And of course, you have new generations coming up too, right? So you can just see this. And I just kind of like got the chills, like when I was there. Like, it was just like really heartwarming to see how sometimes, you know, as a conservationist, we love our work and we're doing what we're doing. And we know that it creates an impact, but then when you see it in people's eyes and you recognize that you are exactly changing lives completely, it just is completely mind-blowing. Wait a second, I'm going back. I don't want to go back in time. I'm going forward. And so in terms of cycles, and I talked about projects and people and how these cycles have, you know, evolved for us within time. Also thinking a bit more kind of like in a complex way. I once had a question which somebody asked me, like, you as a nonprofit, as an NGO, what is your agenda? Like, how do you base your agenda? And of course, our agendas are based on what the community needs, kind of like what we were talking about yesterday, right? But we also believe in these ever-evolving cycles in which experiences in the community can lead to the top, to policy, to management, and from there down, trickle back to the bottom. So I was very grateful to be part of a team tasked with building the ocean literacy strategy for the UN decade of the ocean decade. And so within this, what you can see, and something that actually came through this experience within Tumbes, is this part of, it's always a learning process and a contribution process. Ocean literacy, conservation, whatever we do in life, it's not just about learning. It's about learning so that you can contribute, and contribute at different levels, within schools, within your own organizations, within your homes, within your community. And so this framework was built based on inclusion, diversity, and based on many of the experiences that we had at field with these teachers in order to trickle up to the global system and then come back down again. So I don't want to finish before I also acknowledge all my team members and collaborators and volunteers. And this is just like a small sample of, as well, as you can see, very young faces there. And what is very exciting for me is, within this ever-evolving world, this is likely our 5th generation of, you know, hardcore volunteers that support project leadership on the ground. And you can see, for example, Mariano there. Mariano started as one of the volunteers that were outgoing and researching sawfish and understanding sawfish. He was instrumental in developing this paper, in developing the manta as well, and sawfish legal protection. He became an MCAF grantee, right? And so now we're working together to develop the regional strategy. And you don't have to say, somebody said earlier, you don't have to be a PhD, you don't have to be a specific age in order to start contributing to the world. And so within that, we see how it's an ever-evolving picture. And I'm not saying that this is easy. This is extremely challenging. Just as we were saying about positive cycles, there are completely difficult cycles. Cycles in terms of fundraising and sustainability, cycles in terms of organizational capacity, of human resources. But it's, at the end of the day, it's kind of like the changes that you see. Those changes that you see are the ones that drive you forward. Those faces that you see, that passion, that perseverance, is what drives you forward within each of these cycles. And I'm looking at my daughter in the audience because I knew that she was going to get excited, because she is there in the photo, and that is part of that ever-evolving system. I think that within our own work, we have to constantly be challenging ourselves and learning between each other and learning within ourselves as well on how our own work can better evolve to better conserve and protect our planet. So I just want to thank you very much. Thank you, MCAF, for being so supportive along the way. MCAF has been practically from the very beginning of all of these, enduring long-term cycles that we're seeing that I've mentioned today. And I very much look forward to collaborating and learning from all of you as we continue our cycles further into the future. Thank you very much.
Hello? Oh, great. All right. So you have lasted with us all day. Thank you very much. It has been long, but I'm hoping that you'll leave here with a lot more hope, knowing that there are people across the world working tirelessly to make a difference in so many different ways. I know for a fact that listening to all my friends over here, my fellows, I definitely feel inspired. I see myself in some of your stories. I reflect. I nodded wildly to a lot of things you were saying. I was very it's nice to know you're not alone, right? I think that's a big thing. And I think that's the great thing about the MCAP Fellowship is that we have this community of people who are kind of going through the same cycles, as you say, right? So I guess my first question, and Shah, you're out there. We see you. Hi. Is this what you imagined you'd be doing in terms of conservation work, or what it would be like when you first started your career? Who wants to start? Don't everybody rush at once.
Okay, I'll go. I mean, no.
Good answer.
And I think that when we started working, long ago, and me as a biologist, it was always kind of like, the hardcore science, right? And many of these things that we are bringing in as completely naturally, right? Like work with people, be inclusive, collaborate, like those kind of things are, I mean, I think for us, it's very natural, but it's not as natural for the overall world. And when I first started studying, at least I remember from the very beginning having like colleagues of mine that would say like, "Oh no, I mean, she doesn't do science; she just works with people." It's just that that multidisciplinary engagement. I think it's something that we need, and I think it's something that hasn't been showcased enough. And it even starts from schools, right? I was never taught how to do any of this. Like I was taught the basic science, and from there everything came just by listening to communities. But I think that that's where the humility also comes, when you just open yourself to learning and to listening.
How about you, Flo? Do you feel like this is where I mean, you clearly have a long story. You really want to do this. But do you feel like you found your path?
I think I did. I very similarly to what Kirsten said. When I said earlier today that I basically got into any undergrad studies that would take me closer to the whales, that was like biology or anything else, or nothing else actually. And I feel like that approach to conservation has changed a lot through the years, mainly because I think we understood that for actual effective conservation, you need to work with people, and within the concept of people with like multiple sectors, and scientists are not formally trained to work with people. And happily, most recently, there has been like formal trainings into the interface between law and conservation or economy and conservation that um, allow scientific groups to better communicate with economists, for instance, and to better explain why it's relevant to put money and funding and priorities into conservation issues. So I feel like, considering how I envision myself working with whales at the very beginning compared to now, the community component was definitely not there at the very beginning. And it has been a very rewarding surprise to see and understand, like, firsthand how and why they are relevant to the conservation, and how it, again, like, positive cycles. There's like a positive feedback loop into them seeing how they can actively contribute to the conservation of the whales, like, through which they make a living on. So yeah, it's definitely not how I envision myself, but I'm very happy about it.
It's great. And Rafid, you, from what I can tell, this is not where you thought you'd be. But I will say we are grateful that you got rejected by medical school 5 times, because you have found your purpose in your calling. But what can you tell us in terms of, do you see this as your path, or did you see that you would be doing it this way?
Thank you. Yeah, definitely. I mean, when I was in marine science, I think, like Kirsten and Flo have mentioned, like, traditionally when we were trained during the undergrad, they would just say, like, oh, if you want to work in conservation, you have to have a dive master certificate. You have to be able to identify reef fish or measure corals or whatever. But then I think when I got into there, I got very intimidated. Like, oh, my university is very small, and then they didn't teach me a lot of that. I don't think I can make it to conservation field, really. But then I question myself a lot, like, okay, so you've been collecting this data about coral reef and fish, and there's a disconnect. So, okay, so what? So what are you gonna do with the data? And a lot of people just say, okay, we're gonna use this data for determining management policies, but they never really tell us, like, what management policy. And then I think, like, when I started my journey in Lamakera project, that's when I started to understand, like, oh, okay, so this is actually a really conservation problem. You've been doing research about manta rays, but you really need to craft that information about manta rays so it can be useful to the people that actually depend on them. And that's really sort like a turn. And I identify, like, oh, there's a lot of social components to it that we didn't really taught a lot during undergrad. And then I realized that throughout my internship. And I think that's, the conservation journey that way, like, I grow more aware about it, and then grow more empathetic towards people. It's not only about the science that is important, but also have to be you have to find the solutions to it. And right now, in reality, working in conservations is a lot of sitting at the desk, looking for grants, writing for proposals, and checking on the bills and everything. And it's definitely 100% different right now. Yeah.
Gosh, don't we know how that feels? Shah, how about you?
Yeah, hey, so glad to be here with all you guys. Sorry I couldn't be there in person. But yeah, for me, it was a completely different journey to get into conservation. It's actually my second career. So I spent 11 years working on satellites and, like, the rocket engines on the satellites, not even thinking about conservation. I mean, I was thinking about conservation. I was an environmentalist. I'd donate money to things, and, like, would always like to go scuba diving and stuff like that, but never thought that an engineer would have a home within that world. And it was, like, during grad school that I started to figure these things out and see, like, the ways that we were using technology or tools to try and answer some of these questions at that point felt very backwards to me. And it was actually, the New England Aquarium and MCAF that gave me my first grant to kind of go and talk to people about this idea. I was talking to people about drones back when you would say drones and people aren't thinking about what they're giving their kids for Christmas or whatever. They're thinking about, like, what's happening in Afghanistan and other parts of the world, right? It was a war tool, and I was thinking about ways that we could use it for conservation purposes. And so a lot has changed in that time, and it's created this space of conservation technology, which I think is great. I will say that like as that's grown, I've really started to more talk about the importance of understanding who's actually going to be using that technology. How do we build these things in a way that is inclusive and user friendly and like not this kind of clunky, expensive, inaccessible tool that only certain people get to use, but like what does it look like when we build a version that a fourth grader can use just as well as like the top scientist in the Amazon, right? Like how do you create a situation where you can make these tools no longer a barrier to good science, right? And so that's kind of just been my focus moving forward.
We do start from scratch, right? But also, it's never too late to change your career. I spoke to someone yesterday who was saying that I wanted to, actually, someone this morning who said, I kind of wish I became a marine biologist. It was my childhood dream, but I'm not there anymore. And I was like, it's not too late, right? It isn't. You don't know how your journey is going to evolve, right? And the experiences you have on the way can influence your path. But it's never too late to go where you want to go. So with that, I just want to open up to the audience. I'm sure there's lots of eager people dying to ask questions from this fantastic panel. Now, don't disappoint me. Please ask a question. All right, we got one there. Thank you. I'm just going to summarize, but repeat. That's a really great question and something I've been thinking of a lot. So, but I'm not going to answer the question because it's not my panel. But the question really is thinking about in a lot of these communities, there's a fear around water, right? And like whether and just even accessing water, and for various reasons, whether there's social barriers or cultural or all these different reasons why people don't use the water the way we expect people to use the water. And the question was really, have you experienced that and the different barriers for entry and access to water?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's been really exciting to engage people that have never gone into the water. So some of these fishers that we have worked with were always seeing the giant mantas on board, but they had never gotten in the water with them. So it is kind of like, helping them to get over that fear. And, now many of these fishers have gone out in the water with giant mantas, right? Or their kids as well. In our particular programs, and I know there are amazing and wonderful programs out there that help kids to go out and swim, which is really important so that they can have their eyes within the water. In our particular programs, we've started, because there is a connection, but it's a connection in a different way. I would say we've started more just starting like taking them to the beach and seeing the mangroves. Like many of these kids didn't, like, even though they were close to the beach, they wouldn't even go to the beach, or they had never seen the mangrove ecosystem before. So that's one of the things that we're doing, at least with small kids, but definitely is really interesting to help break those barriers, but also, I guess, to understand that each community has its own way of connecting to the ocean. So we have to also kind of respect that. Sometimes maybe we think that the best way for them to connect into the ocean is for everybody to jump into the ocean and swim in the ocean, but they have maybe another connection through their history, through their fisheries. So just that, taking in mind as you're developing these programs, it's always important to understand what the communities really want and feel, so that you can help guide them within that process.
Do either of you, do you want to have a go?
Yeah, I think for us, we do have this curriculum program that we try to integrate into schools. But fortunately, a lot of students there, especially pupils, they're comfortable in the water, and we don't have any problem with it. But we have this one program called the Conservation Champions that we work mostly with young adults, 18 to 22 years old. And then because I think right now Alo region is very beautiful underwater, but then the ones that actually go dive there, someone's from outside. And then the guides are coming from Jakarta or from Java, who are highly educated, but the local people do not have the opportunity to become a guide or become the ones that actually tell the stories about the oceans there. And we started the recruitment with these young adults. And then surprisingly, we only have one person that actually know how to swim. And it's really hard to like tell them like, oh, like, you know, we're gonna provide you a training, and then the only thing that we need from you is your willingness to learn. And when we say that, we have 20 applicants, but then along the way, one people dropped out, two people dropped out, and we ended up only with 5 people that actually stay and then decided to finish the process of this training. So we provide them with the open water diving until advanced. And one person, he is a student from animal science, husbandry science kind of thing. He never got into the water, and before he joined, he whenever he's water underwater, he start to kind of like gasping and then looking for something to grab. But now he's an advanced diver, and he knows how to tell the stories about corals. He knows how to measure the health of the corals. He knows how to identify seagrasses, and I think that's kind of like a very humbling and very, you know, a proud experience for myself to see that process. And I think, yeah, it's because I mean, like in Eastern Indonesia, culturally, it's really harsh sometimes. Like, you know, when you are making mistakes, people, especially in the family, shout at you and then telling you you're stupid, or like you are, you know, it's very kind of like a shutdown cultural in the education system. So that's kind of like brought up into the growth of the people there. Like whenever they feel like they're making mistakes, they feel like they put pressure on themselves. So we have to change that mindset so much on the students. Like, oh, don't worry if you make mistakes, like this is part of the process. And that's when they started to kind of like feel comfortable and then open up. And then we really need to kind of like make sure that they are staying that way and not feeling discouraged just because they're you know, they're not capable or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, those are good points. And if I just might add to that, it's something I have been thinking about for a long time, because culturally, a lot of countries, even small island nations, people don't swim because there is a fear for the ocean. Because culturally, you know, historically in places, certainly like Sri Lanka, people interacted with the water to fish. It wasn't a place of recreation and conservation, which are quite Western-centric concepts, and we don't really think about it that way. And so because of that, you know, this idea of accessing the water was like, it doesn't make sense. And when I started my career, people thought I was crazy that I want to be a marine biologist. They were like, what are you going to do? And I'm like, it's an island. Like, I'm super confused, right? But it was because they didn't know what I would do. And maybe I was going to study and then become a fisherwoman. Like, that was all they could think about, right? But I mean, fear of water, that's a big point. And I can elaborate so much. I don't know. Isha, if you ever want to contribute, just wave. I'm not sure if you want to, but any other questions from this wonderful audience that we've got here that's sticking with us to the end? Yes, Alan.
I wanted a shout out to Shaw because most people who are inventors and engineers and come up with new ideas want to make a lot of money out of it. And the idea that Shaw is open sourcing all of his ingenious inventions so the world can benefit, and he's not directly financially benefiting, but that's a fantastic contribution you're making. And I'd like to know two things. One is where are you getting your financing? Because it costs money to do what you're doing. And two, what do you think you could do to help all of these other fellows and the kinds of organizations that they're in and what they're doing?
All right, Shah, that started out with a big shout out to you. If you were here, you could have got a high five, but now you get a virtual high five. But the question was, number one, where are you getting all your financing to do the incredible work you do, to make all the work, all the sort of things you are building open source? And the second part is, what are you going to do to help all of us?
Yeah, Well, thank you. I couldn't quite hear the whole thing, but I appreciate it. So we first I'll say is that both Conservify and FieldKit, now independent organizations, are both nonprofits. Our mission is in making these tools easier to come by, for people to use, to spend the kind of time and effort in developing it. You know, my team here is made up of engineers, software developers, the folks that can kind of like think through these sorts of things and develop them in a way that makes them easily reproducible. And then like our mission as nonprofits is how do we take that information and share it out there with the world. And we find funding through grants, primarily like, you know, government, NGO, foundation funding, things like that. That's how we've kept this model moving forward, and it seems to be working pretty well so far. With FieldKit, we're also going to sell hardware if people want to buy hardware instead of building it themselves. That's sort of a typical open source hardware model, right? Where you'll manufacture and build the hardware and people can buy it if they don't want to go through all that effort themselves, because not everyone has this sort of machinery to be able to do that sort of stuff, or they don't want to because it's a headache. And so like, so that might help fund the organization as well to move forward. And then in terms of collaboration, like every single thing that we do is a collaboration. So, you know, I'm always open to working with anybody on any idea that they have. It's been a bit chaotic through the whole COVID time because usually a lot of that collaboration means like going to actually see what the problem is and then designing a solution that works for that problem. I've tried designing solutions for projects that I've never actually set foot in the area. And usually you come there and you're like, okay, like the first 15 of my assumptions are all wrong because I was thinking it was this, but when it was actually this. And so like, you know, the last couple of years, we've just been focused on FieldKit and stuff, but you know, we're now opening things back up and trying to find new interesting projects to work on. So.
Everybody at once. Oh my goodness, such a rush. Okay, do you want me to ask a question? Is that what we're doing right now? Oh, we've got a question. Thank you. You have won the jackpot. Okay, I'm just going to repeat the question first. Just to say, first of all, Jenny is clearly a mad fan of the MCAF program and all the work that's been done here. So thank you very much. But the question really was asking, you know, when you start from scratch, obviously it's very difficult. But then at some point, there's like this little trajectory, like you go from the wishbone to the backbone, like Anna said. And so the question really was like, where do you feel that momentum happened? Is it when you were engaging with communities, or you had like a great colleague, or was it the MCAP funding that spurred you on, or what was it? You know, love to hear about that.
I'm going to provide a very mundane answer, but I think it's worth mentioning that for many small to medium-sized organizations, salaries are a huge limitation to grow capacity on the ground and plan projects in long term. And for us, building a local team of photo ID researchers, um, starting with only one person that has been resuming the work for several decades, by definition required being able to pay to them. We do have volunteers, but of course, you can only ask so much to people who are donating their time to this work. So to us, by far, the momentum was being able to pay for the hours and effort and work of these people, and knowing that the time and energy you invest into training them will pay off in the form of not only the sense of belonging and being part of the team, but also being able to actually move forward into the update of this catalog. And again, I want to highlight that MCAF is rare, really, really rare in that regard, because like 90% of the funding opportunities don't allow us to put budget salaries. It's much more sexy for grant opportunities to fund like fieldwork supplies or the gas that would allow us to get to our field sites and stuff. But to be honest, those people that conducted fieldwork, how to pay the rent and how to eat. So again, MCAF being that honest with that reality and funding the operational costs that are required to get the work done, it's really rare. And to us, it represented by far our momentum.
Great. Yeah, I think we discussed this with Flo and Anna about the challenge of the small NGO. So she already summarized that. But for me, I think I'm considered myself very privileged because first, I can speak English. Second is the most important thing is mentor. There's a lot of young people like myself who actually started NGO but on the second or third year, they cannot sustain their NGOs. First, I think the salaries problem. The second is because they're not very capable in speaking English or writing in English, because all of the grants available out there are in English, and you have to write very clearly and concisely to communicate about that in order to gain money. So a lot of NGOs were not continued in the second or third year. And I think I'm very privileged because that components, like I can speak English, I can write in English, and I have a mentor that like Anna, like I was her student back in 2017, and I also have my own mentor, Mark Erdman, who has been working in Indonesia for decades, and he was the one that really helps me to find and continue. There was this time in my life, like because the nature of conservation is really hard, and my work is trying to transitions of people who've been hunting sharks for hundreds of years into something completely new. And then 2 years ago, I was actually getting a death threat from these people uh, because like they were saying like, oh, you're just someone from outside. You just making us stop to fishing for manta rays and sharks. And he was saying that in the middle of our village meetings, and he was like pointing fingers at me. I was like paralyzed, and I cannot really react. And then my mind is going blank. And then after that meeting, I was really devastated. I went to my field office in my room, and I was like really terrified. And like I was trembling, and then I have my stomach really hurt, and then it's really kind of like a situation that I don't know like what's gonna happen. And it happens for some days, and then like I've been in my room and then I don't have any appetite for eating. And this is like the real confessions on the ground that I can see and experience myself. And at that time, like I decided to call my mentor, Mark, and I was telling him like I have this experience, and he was saying like, oh, I'm sorry you have to go through this. And surprisingly, he experienced that as well when he first started as a conservationist. He said like he got thrown by stones or like being threatened by the people there. And he said like, this is conservation work. This is the real conservation. This is the phase that you have to go through. And, you know, this is the right path because I've been there and you've been in that moment right now. And I think for now, what I can do is to, what he says, like, you know, he said like, take a break. Do not force yourself to keep thinking about work. Go somewhere to the beach and be, you know, by yourself or talk to someone, and then just, you know, try to process everything. And then he actually sent me poetry from Rudyard Kipling from the, and then he said like there was the poetry that his dad sent to him when he first started in conservation, and he sent it to me, and then I read it, and soon after that, like I think I can regain myself again. Like I can like kind of like process that, and then I can find my motivations. And I think that's a lot of access that people in conservation especially do not have experience with, to have someone who's really there and then telling you that it's okay, you know, it is the process of conservation, it is the process of change, and really having someone that really believes in you. And you know, that's why I you know, he even saying like, oh, the way for you to pay the good things that I've done to you is to pay it forward to someone else. And now I'm doing the same thing. Like whenever there's someone wanted to start journey in conservation, at least I'm being some sort of like a mentor that can tell them like, this is the process, and then don't be shocked, like this is the phase that you have to go through. But you know, at least have that mentor is really really helpful for me to stay in this journey. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree with you both. I think that are many ingredients to that recipe. There's lots of things to consider. When I first started, I mean, I remember my teacher from my undergrad school, she was like, "You're going to the communities, just say that you're going, you know, with my support." So I would, you know, give her name, saying, "Yeah, you know, I work with, you know, this teacher, Martha." And so they would start opening doors. So it's having that kind of like support system from family.